Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, and welcome to our very last episode of this tumultuous year, the year of 2020, that will go down mostly for the wrong reasons, but occasionally for good ones. And there are one or two good reasons that are linked to the world of wine. Yes, we've had plenty of hurdles to overcome, especially here in South Africa, in the wine world, from lockdowns to prohibition to trying to get our wine out to the rest of the world. But on the flip side, we've seen the South African wine story grow around the world, more people taking an interest in trying and enjoying South African wine. And so heading into 2021, there is, I think, some muted enthusiasm, some cautious optimism about the year ahead. The 2020 vintage is by all accounts superb, and we've got, as we've had for some time now, a collection of brilliant winemakers and very exciting wine brands coming together to continue this South African wine story. But the continuing success of South African wine will have a big part in its overseas sales, how wine goes around the world. And leading that charge is a very good friend of mine, a very good friend of Dan Really Likes Wine. He is, as we say many times on this show, both the greatest South African wine expert in the UK and the worst dressed man on earth, but will take the wine side and live with the wardrobe simply because he is quite brilliant at his understanding of wine. And he'll be joining me in just a moment, along with another very good friend of mine, an absolute reprobate, one of the greatest cricketers of his era, a South African who got exported or deported, I'm not sure which, to the UK, played for England with great success, played in 2 Cricket World Cups, played many tests, and was famous for fearlessly taking on fast bowlers. He also fearlessly takes on bottles of wine and does so regularly and with great enthusiasm, and that makes him a fabulous guest for Dan Really Likes Wine as we wrap up 2020. And so I say hello to the familiar face that is Greg Sherwood, and making his debut on Dan Really Likes Wine, English cricketing great Allan Lamb. Gentlemen, hello, welcome, and great to have you here. And Greg, you're a regular, so we'll hold off on you for a second and go straight into Mr. Lamb and find out. Lammy, we know you as a cricketer, and there are still many West Indian fast bowlers in therapy after what you did to them, dispatching them around various cricket fields. Tell us a little bit about Allan Lamb, the wine drinker.
Well, Dan, I think growing up in the Western Cape and, going to a proper school called Wine Greg Boys, I had a college of knowledge. We were taught to drink Welbedacht and those sort of fairly sweet wines. And then I became friendly with a few winemakers. And Kevin Arnold was a great guy. He used to run a place called Delheim. And we used to shoot out over weekends. And we used to get one of these little number books, and he used to give us like a pink ticket to get a drink, and we were very lucky. Then Kev used to give us the whole book, and we used to get an absolute mess and then drive back home into Cape Town. But I think my love of wine came from the Western Cape, and there's such wonderful wines that come from there.
There are indeed, and we celebrate a lot of them with you, Greg. And if there is wine to be found anywhere in London, there's usually a Sherwood lurking nearby. How did your path cross, though, with Northampton living Allan Lamb?
Well, I think we've had a few, like all sport and wine, there's a lot of crossroads, and it was a great pleasure to meet up with Allan, who we probably had been passing ships in the night several times. But the love of wine always brings us together, and we had a few lovely catch-ups recently over wine with some private clients, and it was wonderful to actually meet Allan in person as somebody who grew up, as a 71er, so growing up watching cricket in the late 80s, 90s. It's just that was the kind of era that I really kind of fell in love with sport, and it's fantastic. And having this common interest with wine with Allan is sport and wine are just inseparable for me, and as we've discovered with a lot of top sportsmen, so it's great.
The paths that have crossed for us, Lammy, have kicked off with the Dunhill, the Alfred Dunhill Leagues Championship. Sadly, we weren't there this year, but for the last decade, we've enjoyed time there together. And it usually involves a few glasses of wine, involves a few friends of yours. And it seems to me that it's quite a common theme with sportsmen, with cricketers in particular, getting together, post-career, a couple of glasses of wine, remembering some fond trips, some fond memories, some fond matches played together, and all enjoyed over a good glass or two.
Yeah, you're right, Dan. I think probably with the cricket side, and especially when we toured Australia and New Zealand, we got out to the wine farms. You know, in those days you could get out. And when we first started, you used to have the Sunday off. So, you know, Sundays were really bad because we had such a hangover on a Monday to come back to play at the Test match. But so the love of wines grew, and then still from the Western Cape days. And then, you know, I've kept in contact with all the guys in South Africa. And as you know, we all play in the same golf tournaments. And you got Schalk who comes down, and you know, all the guys that are there. And, you know, as the Daniel, we have that lovely South African tasting evening, the wine evening, which is absolutely brilliant. But I've joined this group, and Greg's part of it. It's called the Smatsby Fine and Rare. And I think I've learned more about South African wines on that group because there are so many different wines. So I've now, with Greg and Ian Banner, I've sort of opened up a cellar down in Cape Town. So I'm trying to create a nice big cellar for myself down in Cape Town, and then have it, when I really got a good cellar, I'm going to have it shipped over here.
And a great collection it will be. I'm not sure how long it will last, but a great cellar it will be. It'll be a cellar that might include a few of the wines that we're going to drink together. I know you've got some of them with you. Greg's got some of them with him. It's a slight mismatch, but a lovely collection nonetheless. And let's kick off with the Mutual Appreciation Society, Lammy, because we've got some Naude Chenin Blanc, and I know that you're a big fan of the wines of Ian Naude. And you speak to Ian Naude, I think he's actually still got a yellowing poster of Allan Lamb up on his bedroom wall at home.
Yeah, I didn't realize Eben was such a great fan, and that. So we've been speaking fairly regularly, and Greg's sort of got us in touch on that. So I've been very lucky enough. He somehow found a couple of the 2013 Chenin Blancs hidden away. So they've come through Greg to me. So which is wonderful, and that's what I've got at the moment. Is a beautiful little Chenin Blanc 2013, which I feel if I blind taste someone, you could be drinking a Burgundy. That's how good it is. You know, I wouldn't, if anyone asked me that was a Chenin Blanc, I would say no ways.
Let's get a little bit of background on this particular wine, Greg. I know you're also a leading member of the not insubstantial Ian Naude fan club. This is his Old Vine Chenin. We tried it before on the show, but it's well worth going back to what makes this particular wine so exceptional.
Yeah, I think Dan, you know, the reason I quite like to champion Ian is because he spent so many years as a kind of someone working away, making other people great, mentoring people like Ibn Sadi and lots of youngsters around the Cape, you know, years and years ago. And he worked for a number of wineries, making some, you know, fantastic wines. But I think he's only really started to catch the world's attention with his own Naude family wines, because he has, you know, his own project now that he can promote himself. And we all know he's a very modest guy and he doesn't like to put himself center stage. So I kind of take it on myself to, you know, get the world to know a bit more about his wines, because Ian's a bit backward in coming forward. He comes over, or normally he would come over to London once or twice a year, and we would hold some incredible tastings. We've had a lot of kind of all our top clients. We've had sportsmen like David Campisi down there. We've had famous journalists, Jeremy Bowen's a Middle East editor, BBC is a big fan, and he comes out and Ian hosted him in the Cape. And there's been a lot of kind of crossing of paths, and somehow the common link always seemed to be this 2013 Chenin Blanc that I coined as the Coche d'Ury of Chenin Blanc. And still for me, with all the great wines that have been made in South Africa, I rate this as probably one of my top 3 whites ever produced, certainly from Chenin Blanc and even just in white wines. So it's a bit mythical now. I think Ian kind of shipped a few of his last archive cases to me, which Lammy got his hands on. So it's quite a special wine now. But when we do pull it out, it's always wine of the night or wine of the lunch. So it's a very special wine. But I think it just encapsulates Ian's true talent and his style of precision, cool climate winemaking, you know, just kind of cool style, lower alcohols, just real, almost kind of French, Burgundian, kind of almost mentality, and it's fantastic. And I think that captures the minds of real connoisseurs like Allan and many others. So it's great. It's a great wine. Sadly, it won't last forever, because even though the wine might, because it's almost monolithic in development. But sadly, we just can't stop drinking it.
Before anybody interjects there and says, Allan Lamb, wine connoisseur, are you sure about that? He's a cricketer. Well, you've actually got not just many years of experience of consuming wine, Lammy, but also international experience, because Allan Lamb, the cricketer, is now Allan Lamb, the bespoke travel agent. And you've spent a lot of time traveling the world, experiencing not just different cultures and different food, but drinking wine all over the place, which, your South African roots notwithstanding, I'm sure gives you some perspective on just how well South African wine compares with wine from the rest of the world.
Well, I didn't realize about all these other young winemakers that have come through really till lockdown. I knew all the big guns, but all these new wines that have hit the block and getting such great ratings is just incredible. So, I mean, I always said, Dan, that the biggest disappointment was I never played against South Africa. I did in Australia in the World Cup semi-final, but my biggest aim was to tour England, play South Africa, because I could have taken my guys to all the wine farms. We would have had such fantastic fun. But unfortunately, we never got that chance. But I've been lucky enough to taste some great South African wines and gone to some great vineyards down in Cape Town and Stellenbosch.
And I'd have believed that tour never happened, because South Africa would have won so comfortably based on the state the entire England squad would have been in because of you running their wine tours. So I think everybody would have won with that one. Speaking of wine farms, let's move on to a second label. You've mentioned him briefly already. He's a close friend of mine, close friend of yours, and a close friend of Greg's. The man who works as the stunt double for Hagrid in the Harry Potter movies, Kurt Schalk.
Old Skelly. Listen, we played rugby against each other and we didn't even know that. And Rob recalled the days. So when he was at Paul Boys, so I always said, Paul Boys, we used to give them hammering. But I found that Schalk is much more my junior, so I didn't realize it. So I think we only played once against each other at school, but you wouldn't think he's my junior. I wouldn't say anything wrong to him, because I'd probably pick me up and put me in a tree or something. But I've taken some great English friends of mine on wine tastings there, and not many of them have managed to walk out. I've been one of them too, that he has absolutely got me into all types of problems. But he's such an amazing guy. I mean, I just love it, and we've had lots of parties. We've had lots of our tour parties, and we've had some great days at Schalk's farm.
Tell us a little bit about the Schalkberger wine from the perspective of someone in the wine industry, Greg. As Allan says, we'd never criticize Schalk's wine because he's 4 times the size of all of us. But how does it rate, and what makes the wines of Welbedacht and that particular part of the world out in Wellington distinctive for you?
Well, I think not everybody knows that much about Welbedacht, because a lot of its fame in the old days was based on a certain wine brand owned by Mark Kent, Boekenhoutskloof, snaffling a lot of the top Syrah for the Boekenhoutskloof Syrah, which was one of the best kept secrets in South Africa. But what people don't also probably know is that Welbedacht farms 200 hectares of vines, most of it or much of it very old vines. They've got old vine Shannon, old vine Syrah. They've got incredible Cabernet plantings, Merlot, and Chardonnay. It's just an incredible selection of varieties there. And now, in the last few years, the Welbedacht name, with the sons on board and really pushing the brand, has really kind of reaching new heights. And we've got Allan and I have a mutual friend, ex-England player Simon Halliday, who played in the '91 World Cup, and he brings in Schalk's wines. And so Schalk, he introduced me to Schalk quite a few years ago, and we've done really well with the wines. And I've got a bit of Bohemian Syrah from the Groeneberg in Wellington there, one of the sub-appellations of Wellington, and incredible wine. And you can really see why people like Buchanan's Cliff wanted to protect the kind of origin of this fruit, because it's exceptional. And now a lot of that's going into the Bohemian, and it's one of our best-selling Syrahs, certainly in the shop. And we started with the 15. We've moved on to the 16 now, but great vintage. And I just love the farm. I take clients out there. They're all kind of big cricket lovers. We love drinking the cricket pitch and the hat trick. And of course, it's great to get our hands on the infamous number 6 red. So if we're lucky, but a lovely wine and a lovely family. And hopefully, Schalk Jr. now he's retired from playing, might get a bit more involved. But I think he might like the media circle a bit more before he goes and does a bit of pruning and picking on the farm with his brother.
Yeah, so I suspect the little brother Kieran will do most of the hard work. Schalk's putting his feet up a little post-rugby, and well deserved. Lammy Sculler is a good friend of both of us. He's someone we spend a lot of time with, and we spend time with him in the company of another mutual friend whose wine you've also got some of there with you. Jeremy Ord, the man who, together with the aforementioned Kevin Arnold, kicked off Waterford. And whether it's over at the Dunhill or at the Dimension Data Pro-Am, Jeremy's tournament at Fancourt, we both get to spend time with Jeremy, but also drink some of his wine, including the gem. I think you've got a little of it there. Tell us a little bit about your friendship with Jeremy and about drinking his wine.
Yeah, well, it goes back a long way, really. Through Kevin, because Kevin I've known because we sort of did our national service. He was in the Air Force too, so up in Pretoria. So that's how far back we go. And then sort of when he took over at Waterford, I got to know Gem, and then through the golf and the Dimension Data and the Daniel. So great guy, and I think Kevin's been brilliant for Waterford and done so well for them, and got such great wines in that. And we've got the Lions tour next year, and Kevin's doing a big wine tasting lunch. And we're getting all the old legends along, which is going to be fantastic the day before the second test match. So fingers crossed that the COVID is gone and we can get back to normal living.
We'll be drinking plenty of wine along the way, just to ease the passage through to a world back to normal, including that gem. I think you've got a touch of it there, Lammy. If you will, pour yourself a touch of it so we can get your thoughts on it. And while you do pour yourself a touch, which in Lamb language means decant half the bottle, back to you there, Mr. Sherwood. The gem, it's not an inexpensive wine. The latest incarnation, picking up 5 stars from the team at Plata. How good is it in terms of South African blends, and how good is it on a global scale?
What's quite funny, the gem, we just last year, end of last year, we had the first ever global full vertical of gem done anywhere with the winemaker, and we tried from 2004 all the way to 2015. And I wrote up the wines, and it was really incredible because I've kind of followed the whole release of this super premium. It was one of the first super premium red kind of blends from the Cape, with a bit of exotic twist of some Italian varieties, and it kind of was built around trying to match the terroir of Waterford Estate, and with some inspirations from Kevin, who obviously he's a big Syrah lover, and I still remember his maiden Kevin Arnold Shiraz 98. We had a launch at Pretoria Country Club with some sporting greats there back in the day. But the gem, it's a fantastic one, but it's been fine-tuned over the years, and now certainly with the 2013, the 2014, and now the fantastic 2015, it's really hitting a new level of collectability, of quality, of scores, and I think it's really found a kind of comfort zone of stylistically where it wants to be. Whereas the early years, it was still a lot of experimentation. So I think it's a very comfortable wine in its own skin now, and it's worth a penny. And it's got a new representative in the UK, Hanford Wines. So we look forward to tasting lots of the new vintages, 16, 17s coming over of the regular range, and certainly the 15 gem we look forward to drinking some of that too. So very exciting times, and with new agents and new distribution in the UK, I think we'll hopefully see Mark LaRue come over one of these days, or early in the new year, to come and launch a few of the wines. Very exciting, and a great estate, beautiful estate, and a beautiful wine.
I suspect a lot of that wine won't be staying in London long. It'll be on a lorry heading up to Northampton, and the home of Mr. Allan Lamb. Lammy, I'm guessing you've got that in your glass now. Have a sip for us, and tell us what makes the wine special for you.
Well, it's I can taste the chocolate in it, and it's very smooth. I think, I opened it a little earlier so it could breathe a little bit more, but I think it's fantastic. But with the old connoisseur there, I'd love to know what his thoughts of them is.
I think the secret of it is certainly the last few years, tasting this vertical, which even the guys who had worked for the Waterford for a long time had never done. And they don't obviously have lots of the old 04s, 05s, some of the old bottles, because it was a small production wine. But tasting them all in context and see how the style has evolved, and how they're fine-tuned and Kevin's polished it, it's very exciting. But I think, when it's got things like that kind of Barbera and things like in it, it adds a little bit of that kind of subtle cherry spice and a little bit of exoticism, a little bit of licorice. But what it is always is constant, even since the first 04, which was a blockbuster vintage, of course, is this kind of seamless tannin management. And I think that really comes to the fore in the 2014 and the 2015, which are two quite big years. 14 a bit of a cooler year, 15 obviously a blockbuster. But just the management and the mouthfeel of the tannins is just incredible. So I think, sometimes well-made wines are hard to describe because they're just so seamless. And this has got 6, 7, 8 varieties. I'd have to double check, blended in, but it's so seamlessly done that, you don't know where to start unpicking the wine because it's just such a harmonious kind of blend.
And they managed to do that consistently as well, which is always the hallmark of a fine estate, delivering that sort of quality regularly and finding fans in all three of us. We've got one more wine to try, Lammy. Before I ask you to pour some of that one, I'll ask you to start giving some thought to the final question I'll ask you. Often in a sporting environment, we ask people who their dream four-ball would be. I'd like to know who the 3 cricketers you would have around for dinner would be if it was going to be a night of fine wine and indulgence. I suspect there might be a guy called Botham involved, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's kick off with the last of these and the Vilafonte. And I think this is always a wine that is fantastic to be able to show people who either don't know about South African wine or maybe don't have the highest opinion of South African wine, because you give them something like this and it tends to change their mind or convert them very quickly indeed.
Well, that is the Vilafonte, which to me is absolutely delicious. 2012, old Mike Ratcliffe. I just love it. It is just a wonderful wine, and producing wine like that is just phenomenal.
I almost want to, Greg, send Mike a note and apologise, because I am drinking it here. It's the Vilafonte 2012, as we've confirmed. And it is still so fresh. It is still so bright and vital that you think, gee, I should have kept this for another 5-10 years before I opened it.
Yeah, it's a nice little link between, say, the Gem and Vilafonte, because what they share is this vision for South African greatness, precision in winemaking, super premium wines that can take on the very best in the world. Certainly for Vilafonte, Mike's gone about it in a more classical sense with his Series C and Series M, which aim to take on the very best of Bordeaux, best of Napa, best of the rest of California, and certainly the best of Australia and New Zealand. And I think is now finally, after maiden vintage 03, is being recognized, certainly since the 16-17 releases, just as one of the most phenomenal wines, premium wines in South Africa. And it's got a massive following. We are involved here in London with some of the membership, and it's incredible that the connoisseurs that order this wine, really kind of knowledgeable people who are absolutely in love, and there's kind of panic buying because the wines do sell out quite quickly, some of the vintages, especially something like the Series C16, which won the best Bordeaux blend in the world, and I think we've talked about it on previous shows. But I just love Mike's vision with Alma and Phil Freeze, and wanting to make the best wine in the world. And I have great admiration for him. He obviously took a bit of stick in the early years, thinking, because they started on the ground level, planting the vineyards, new site up in Paarl, just across the N1, and everything has been done with precision and no cost spared. And now we're finally seeing that all these years later. And even those maiden vintages, the 03, 04, 05, they're all drinking beautifully. And we sell a bit of the archive Series M05 at the moment. And I mean, these wines are all just super youthful and like you'd expect from a well-made, top premium South African wine. So it's great that people like Allan and some of the other kind of high-profile kind of sports celebrities, have got to know Mike, and I actually, got to know also Ian Banner through the Cape Wine Auction and the charity work we do there as a brand ambassador for them in the UK. And it's great that I get to drink a bit of this Vilafonte with Mike regularly.
Yeah, nobody will turn it down in a hurry. Let me be before we wrap up, because I know you've probably got a signing session to go and do at a local supermarket or whatever it is you big celebrities do on Friday afternoons. 2 questions for you. I've already preempted you one. The other hopefully won't take too much recollection. We had John Smith on the show a couple of weeks back, and he recalled flying back from the Rugby World Cup with the help of a couple of bottles of wine, celebrating that fabulous victory in Paris in 2007. Do you have a particular wine-linked cricket memory somewhere traveling around the world in your cricket days, where either linked to a match or going to visit a winery or just spending time with a team that comes back to you with great fondness? And then if I can ask you, for the other 3 people around your dinner table from the cricketing world, that perfect night of wine.
Well, Dan, I probably think it would be Australia. There was a guy called David Gower who knew the Bollinger people very well. And he managed to get us sponsored with Bollinger. I mean, it's the first time a England cricket team have been sponsored by Champagne. And then we got a winemaker called Jeff Merrill to sponsor us the red wine and the white wines. But there was a condition in this. He said for every test match that we lose, we would drink the Bollinger RD, and then we'd have the best red wine and the white wine, Jeff Merrill. And for every one we drew, it came down a little bit. And for every one we won, we just got really the plain, ordinary bottles. Unfortunately, we went ahead and we beat them 2-1 Australia. But we had so much wine. I think Peter May came over, and he was over in Australia, and we looked in the foyer, and there was more cases of wine and champagne than cricket cases. And he looked, he said, "What is this team doing?" And I said, "Well, this is what makes us perform well, Peter." I mean, he was absolutely shocked in it, but that was great fun. And as when we toured, it was great in Australia to get out to see these. And Jeff Merrill was one of the greats who took us around to all these wine farms and that, which was fantastic. The 4-ball, I don't know about the golf. He doesn't play golf, but there's one I would have, is Dennis Lilly. He has one of the finest cellars down in Perth, which he's very, very kind enough to invite you in and have a few bottles. My other 4-ball, well, I'm thinking about him, but he's very, very, he's not, I'd say he hardly takes me into his cellar or gives me a bottle of his wine, is Ian Botham. So I want to make that known, that he is very stingy and he keeps his cellar locked all the time. But the other guy who has got a great cellar, I toured a lot with, is David Gower. Probably David Gower was the one with myself that really got Ian Botham drinking wines, because he was basically a lout in those days. And then we sort of nursed him into champagne and fine wines and, all that type of stuff. And now he's making his own wines. He said, "Well, why did I play cricket?" He tells me. I said, "Well, that's where you got your name from. That's why you're making wine now." So I think it was probably, and the other guy I would have on the bench was Bob Willis, because Bob Willis was great, loved his wines, and a great tourist too. So probably that would be my team.
That sounds like a pretty good night out. It sounds like a pretty average morning the next morning, but the night would certainly be fantastic. Both the wine, but also the company and the raconteurship that would come out of the group. I've been lucky enough to spend time with most of those guys, mostly yourself. And it would be a fabulous, fabulous evening. So perhaps that's something we should hold you to. But in the interim, I think, Mr. Sherwood, the next interaction should be with the aforementioned Mr. Skulkberger when Lammy's out for the Lions Tour next year. I've got no doubt that Hanford Wines will mysteriously need to have a look at the South African wine market during the course of the Lions Tour next year. And we can descend on Welbedacht for a tasting with Lammy and Sculler.
Absolutely. I hope Schalk's grooming that cricket pitch and getting the cellar ready, because we're gonna come and visit, and we're gonna just check on the stocks there in the cellar, and they may be a bit lower when we leave.
Listen, make sure you got a driver, because he puts that foot in the door and you can't get out. He sits you down and says, "That's it, you're staying with me now."
I have to say, since Simon Halliday introduced Schalk many years ago, I was quick to rope him in, and he is our chairman of the Hanford Oyster Club. And whenever he's over in London, we take a couple of fine bottles of white Burgundy and red Burgundy, and we pop across the road to two of my good friends, Ben Wright and Robin, who own Wright Brothers UK. And we sit there in a little booth and we eat oysters until we can't eat anymore. Dan, you're a member of the Oyster Club. Alan, we'll get you on board soon. But Dan's a member. And any aspire, but few are chosen. So it's quite an elite club. But we've got some lovely members. Anthony Hamilton Russell would probably register as vice president if we had to go down the ranks. We do a fine Burgundy lunch with him and his lovely wife every year. And Ian's a regular there, and some of the the classic fine winemakers. So it's very exciting. So, but Schalk, he's always very generous with his time. It's normally before the Dunhill, so we try and get him lubricated and just get those joints working with a bit of white Burgundy and a bit of. But we'll get you on board, Alan, when the lockdown's over.
Greg, I got to tell you, Dan, before the Dunhill, we always have a lunch at the fish. There's a lovely fish restaurant, and we've got a nice team. We call it the Wine Onlookers now, and everyone goes for lunch the night before or the day before the Dunhill opens, and it's a long one. It goes through to about 5 o'clock, and Big Scullers is there by 12 because he doesn't like to play the day before because it'll affect his game. And I have seen him eat oysters. That tongue. I seen the shell go down too. So he's not one of those delicate man to stick his tongue into an oyster and just whip it out. I think he swallowed a few shells in the time too, but he's fantastic. So we missed that this year because we always look forward to it. We're going to have to invite Dan to that lunch because it's only a selected bunch. But I think, Dan, we're definitely going to invite you next year to that the Wine Onlookers lunch.
Well, I would be greatly honoured, and I will look forward to that, as I will look forward to seeing you both out in South Africa around the Lions Tour next year, and our trip down to Welbedacht to see Schalk, and sometime in the UK. I'm sure that'll happen together soon as well. But it's a very appropriate way to wrap up the year, to have some fun and some light-hearted wine interaction. Greg, big thank you for all of your support this year. You've been an absolute champion, not just for Dan Really Likes Wine, but far more importantly for South African wine. You've done a huge job, and thank you for it. And Lammy, I know you spread the gospel as well, from a personal perspective, as well as amongst your circle of acquaintance. So keep on drinking that South African wine, keep enjoying it, and we look forward to seeing you soon back in South Africa.
Good, and I'm looking forward to Greg to keep that cellar open too.
So there we go, a very special gathering to wrap up 2022. Good friends of mine, Greg Sherwood, Master of Wine and the man behind Hanford Wines in South Kensington, doing a terrific job getting South African wine into that UK market, and Allan Lamb, the Mayor of Northampton, cricketing great, and now touring the world with his bespoke travel business and sampling great wine and getting reminded on a regular basis that nothing is quite like South African. So big thank you to them. Big thank you to everybody who's watched the show during the course of 2020. Enjoy what remains of this daft year. And here's to 2021 being a little less chaotic, a little more easygoing, and as ever, full of great South African wine. From the Dan Really Likes Wine team, here's to 2021. Cheers.